Breaking news emerged late last night that has since captured widespread public attention and ignited intense discussion about family trust, financial security, and moral responsibility. According to initial reports, a retired father received an unexpected phone call from his adult son just hours before midnight. What began as a seemingly ordinary conversation quickly turned into a moment that the father later described as one of the most devastating shocks of his life. In a calm but decisive tone, the son reportedly announced, "I'm getting married tomorrow. I withdrew all the money from your bank account." There was no prior discussion, no request for permission, and no warning that such a life-altering decision was about to be made. Sources close to the father say he had spent decades working in modest conditions, carefully saving every possible amount to ensure stability in old age. Those savings were not meant for luxury but for survival, medical needs, daily expenses, and the reassurance that he would not become dependent on others. The bank account in question was reportedly shared for convenience, a common arrangement in families where aging parents rely on younger relatives to help manage paperwork and transactions. That access, granted purely out of trust, would soon become the center of a deeply painful controversy. When the son delivered the news, the father was allegedly too stunned to respond immediately. Friends later shared that he initially believed it was a joke or misunderstanding. However, as the reality settled in, panic and disbelief followed. The withdrawal, according to preliminary information, emptied the account almost entirely, leaving the father with little to no immediate financial support. The timing of the call, just one day before the wedding, added to the sense of emotional pressure, making it nearly impossible for the father to respond rationally in that moment. As the story began circulating, it quickly resonated with a broad audience. Many people saw reflections of their own family dynamics in the situation, particularly the unspoken expectation that parents will always sacrifice for their children, regardless of age or circumstance. Early reactions online described the call as not just shocking, but symbolic of a growing generational conflict where financial stress, rising living costs, and personal ambition collide with traditional values of respect and care for parents. What has drawn particular attention is the manner in which the information was delivered. The son did not ask for help or explain his situation beforehand. Instead, he informed his father after the fact, framing the withdrawal as a completed action rather than a shared decision. Financial observers note that this detail alone transforms the issue from a family disagreement into a serious ethical concern. The absence of consent, combined with the urgency implied by the upcoming wedding, has led many to question whether emotional pressure was deliberately used to prevent resistance. Within hours of the report surfacing, social platforms were flooded with commentary. Some users expressed disbelief that a child could make such a decision without consulting the very person whose future depended on that money. Others debated whether parental sacrifice should have limits, especially when parents are elderly and financially vulnerable. The father's age and retired status have further intensified public sympathy, as many see the savings as his last line of security. At this early stage, official statements remain limited, and many details are still being verified. However, what is already clear is that this single phone call has exposed a painful and complex reality faced by many families today. It raises uncomfortable questions about trust, entitlement, and the fine line between family support and exploitation. As the situation continues to unfold, this developing story stands as a stark reminder that financial trust within families, once broken, can leave wounds far deeper than any monetary loss. As the initial shock of the late-night phone call settled, further details began to surface, revealing a far more complex and troubling situation than first believed. According to individuals familiar with the matter, the son had been given access to the bank account several years earlier, not as a gesture of generosity, but as a practical arrangement. The father, now retired and dealing with age-related challenges, trusted his son to help with digital banking, bill payments, and occasional withdrawals when travel to the bank became difficult. There had never been any discussion suggesting that this access could be used for major personal expenses, let alone to fund an entire wedding. Financial professionals observing the case point out that such arrangements are extremely common, particularly in families where parents rely on their children for technical assistance. However, they also warn that these informal agreements often lack legal safeguards, leaving elderly account holders exposed to significant risk. In this situation, the father reportedly believed that mutual understanding and family values were sufficient protection. That belief, now under intense scrutiny, has become a key element of public debate as more people recognize how easily trust can be misused. Reports suggest that the son justified his decision by citing urgent financial pressure. Wedding costs, social expectations, and limited personal savings allegedly pushed him toward what he described as a temporary solution. According to sources, he believed that withdrawing the money was reasonable because it would stay within the family and could be repaid over time. This explanation, however, has done little to ease public criticism. Many argue that urgency does not eliminate responsibility, especially when the funds in question represent another person's entire financial safety net. Legal experts have weighed in, explaining that while joint or authorized access to an account may allow withdrawals, it does not automatically grant ethical or legal ownership of the funds. Consent remains a central issue. Analysts emphasize that intent to repay does not change the immediate impact of the action, particularly when the withdrawal leaves an elderly parent financially exposed. Some specialists have gone further, labeling such behavior as a form of financial abuse, a term that has gained increasing attention in cases involving seniors. Community reaction has continued to grow more intense as these details emerge. Call-in radio programs, comment sections, and online forums are filled with heated discussion. A minority of voices express cautious sympathy for the son, noting the financial strain many young adults face in the current economy. They argue that cultural pressures surrounding marriage can be overwhelming and that desperation sometimes leads to poor decisions. However, the overwhelming majority of responses reject this reasoning, stating that personal milestones should never come at the expense of a parent's dignity and security. What has particularly troubled observers is the emotional dynamic at play. The father is described as deeply conflicted, torn between anger, fear, and parental loyalty. Friends say he feels betrayed yet hesitant to confront his son aggressively, worried that doing so could permanently damage their relationship. This emotional paralysis, experts say, is common in similar cases. Elderly parents often struggle to assert their rights when the person responsible is their own child, a factor that allows such situations to escalate unchecked. Financial advocacy groups have begun using this case as an example in broader discussions about elder financial protection. They stress the importance of written agreements, limited access controls, and regular account monitoring. Several organizations have issued public reminders encouraging seniors to seek independent financial advice, even when dealing with trusted family members. The goal, they say, is not to undermine family bonds but to ensure that love and trust are not exploited. As investigations continue and more information becomes available, the story has evolved from a shocking phone call into a cautionary tale with far-reaching implications. It underscores the fragile balance between family support and personal boundaries, and it highlights how easily good intentions, or perceived necessities, can cross into harmful territory. While the son's motivations may be debated, the consequences of his actions are already clear, leaving behind a father facing uncertainty and a public grappling with uncomfortable truths about trust within families. As the story continues to unfold, its impact has expanded far beyond the private conflict between a father and son, becoming a focal point for national discussion about aging, financial independence, and accountability within families. What began as a single phone call has now triggered broader conversations among policymakers, legal experts, and social organizations who see this case as representative of a growing and often hidden problem. Elder financial vulnerability, once considered a marginal issue, is now being openly discussed as families navigate economic pressure, longer life expectancy, and shifting cultural expectations. Senior advocacy groups have been quick to respond, using the case to highlight warning signs that often go unnoticed until it is too late. They emphasize that financial abuse does not always involve strangers or scams. In many cases, it occurs quietly within families, shielded by emotional bonds and social silence. Representatives from these organizations note that elderly parents frequently avoid speaking out, fearing shame, family breakdown, or retaliation. In this situation, the father's hesitation to act immediately has resonated deeply with others who admit they might react the same way under similar circumstances. Legal analysts have clarified that the father's options, while emotionally difficult, are not limited. Seeking legal advice does not automatically mean pressing charges or destroying family ties. Instead, it can provide clarity, protection, and structured solutions such as account recovery, repayment agreements, or revised access controls. Lawyers familiar with elder law stress that early intervention is crucial, as delays can complicate recovery and reduce available remedies. Still, they acknowledge that the emotional weight of taking formal action against one's own child can be overwhelming, especially for older parents who value family unity above all else. Public opinion, largely shaped through social media and opinion columns, has been overwhelmingly supportive of the father. Many describe the son's actions as a clear violation of trust and label it as financial exploitation, regardless of intent. Hashtags calling for stronger protections for seniors have trended, and online polls show a strong consensus that parental sacrifice should have boundaries. The message echoed repeatedly is that love does not justify entitlement, and family relationships do not nullify personal rights. At the same time, some commentators urge caution against reducing the situation to a simple narrative of villain and victim. They argue that economic pressures on younger generations are real and intense, driven by rising costs of living, social expectations around weddings, and limited financial mobility. However, even these more nuanced perspectives stop short of defending the action itself. Instead, they frame it as a failure of communication, planning, and respect, rather than an unavoidable outcome of hardship. Financial institutions have also entered the conversation, responding to public concern by reiterating guidelines for joint accounts and authorized access. Banking representatives emphasize that customers should regularly review account permissions and consider safeguards such as withdrawal limits or alerts. Some banks are reportedly reviewing their educational materials for senior clients, aiming to better explain risks that arise when access is shared informally with family members. The case has become a practical example used to illustrate why such measures matter. For the father at the center of the story, the future remains uncertain. Those close to him say he is grappling not only with financial instability but with emotional loss. Trust, once broken, is difficult to restore, and the realization that his own security could be compromised so suddenly has left lasting fear. Yet there are also signs of resilience. Encouraged by public support and professional advice, he is reportedly considering steps to protect himself going forward, regardless of how the family relationship ultimately evolves. As this situation continues to develop, its significance lies not only in the outcome of one family's struggle, but in the awareness it has created. It forces society to confront uncomfortable questions about obligation, respect, and independence across generations. Where does parental support end and personal responsibility begin? How can families balance trust with protection without eroding relationships? These questions have no easy answers, but the conversation they inspire may prevent similar crises in the future. Ultimately, this case stands as a powerful reminder that financial security is deeply tied to dignity and autonomy, especially in later life. When those are threatened, even by family, the consequences ripple outward, affecting not just individuals but the values a society chooses to uphold.